AI is half the size of 56% the size of search. In 2026, it is a big channel, number one, so it's worth investing in.
That's not a prediction. That's happening right now. And most marketers are still optimizing like it's 2019. And here's the thing that should scare every marketer listening to this. The SEO playbook we've been running for the last 10 years may be dead in the next 6 months. The way that people are searching in ChatGPT and Perplexity is completely different than the way that they search in Google. Longer prompts, different intents, and different winners.
So it is uniquely a channel where a small new company can compete, as opposed to organic, where that's not true. The smart people who use AI are the turbo brains, and we become way more productive. And then there's people who don't use AI, bad times for them.
Today, I'm sitting down with Ethan Smith, the CEO of Graphite. He's got the actual research data, not opinions, proprietary data sets that were revealed for the first time on this episode.
Everything might get replaced at some point. I'll have my AI best friend, and I like them more than humans. But in the meantime, I think that the human relationship piece is another thing that we're doubling down on.
I'm Austin Willman, and this is eCoffee with Experts. Let's get into it. So, Ethan, I was doing research before this episode, listening to a few of your podcasts, Lenny's podcast, the AirOps podcast, and I can't remember which one it was, but you said that there's no first mover advantage, but a study shows that LLMs are already 56% of global research volume or global search volume. Isn't that actually like the last uncrowded window before AEO gets commoditized, as Google SEO did?
Yes. Let's unpack that. So I said on a podcast with Mike Dubois and at Greylock and Firma, this is in 2024, I think, that I did not think that there was a first mover advantage. And then I just published something on Monday showing that AI is half the size of, or 56% the size of search. So how could those both be true? And my opinion is it's in 2024, it was not a big channel. In 2026, it is a big channel, number one. So it's worth investing in. However, you could enter whenever you want and you could start seeing impact. It's not as though if you don't start now, you can never compete there. You can compete whenever you want. Now, it might take a few months to start getting impact, but whenever you want to start, you can start. Now, having said that, should you start now? Yes, you should start now. In 2024, when it was a small channel and you're a resource constrained startup, should you focus on the 10th largest channel? Probably not. You should probably focus on something else. But now it's like number 3 for some companies, number 1 channel. So you should definitely focus on it now.
Yeah. And going right down that path. So if you're a resource constrained startup, maybe it's not the best channel because you're saying maybe typical long tail SEO keywords are a better place to start or are you saying that actually if you're a resource constrained startup, you can get cited in AEO tomorrow? How does that work with a small team versus an enterprise?
So it is uniquely a channel where a small new company can compete, as opposed to organic, where that's not true. So when startups ask me what they should do for search engine optimization, I usually say you shouldn't work on it. You should go work on other things, get traction there. And then when you have more authority, you do organic to amplify the authority that you've built. Because it's hard as a brand new company if you don't have any backlinks, then you don't have page ranks a long time to be able to be competitive frequently in search, especially for the most competitive terms. But for AI, that's not true.
Yeah. Because AI is pulling citations from user-generated content. You talked about Reddit. You talked about how video may have a surgence in the future because there's so much context in video outside of the transcript. Let's just talk about early stage startups for a second. For someone who is like a 3-person team, what do you feel like is the channel to go after if you're optimizing for AEO? Is it video? Is it mastering the Reddit thing? It's kind of an ambiguous problem that many people are trying to figure out right now. You can hire an agency. I had 2 conversations last week with Reddit agencies. They see this trend. If you're a smaller startup, what channel are you looking to dominate?
If I'm a resource constrained company, I would do 2 things. I would do product content to focus on the long tail of AI, and I would do PR probably. I would probably not do Reddit. That might be my 3rd or my 4th. I think my 3rd and my 4th would be Reddit and video. But if I'm a small company, I'm not doing those 2 things because I think that it's going to take a bunch of, like I've seen people spin in circles on Reddit and go make fake accounts and then post it on a thread where nobody's asking about your product. I'm like, hey, has anyone seen this cool product? Like, why are you here? And you have no karma. So like you could do that, but it's not trivial and it's not controllable. You're at the behest of the community, and it's, you know, a lot of the Reddit stuff is spam. So what you have control over, you have control over creating content that answers questions that have not been answered. So that would be product related content like integrations and use cases, features, and things like that. So do that. And that's different from SEO because a lot of product related prompts have low search volume, but high prompt volume. And so that's why keep doing your SEO, but do product content for the long tail prompts, and then do PR. Because if you look at the top 10 cited domains pie chart, top 10 cited domains pie chart has like third Reddit, 25% Wikipedia, 15% YouTube, which is totally wrong. It's relative to the 10. But if you look at the distribution of all of the top cited domains, there's thousands of them, tens of thousands. And the top 10 account for less than 5% of citations. Citations are extremely fragmented, which means that you can't just, like Reddit's 2.36% of cited domains for analysis that we did. So 2.5%. So even if you crack Reddit, that's 2.5% of all citations, which is not that many. What actually matters is going broad. And the way that you go broad is with PR or content syndication or some of these wide net type strategies versus a focused Reddit only strategy.
Okay. And I agree. There's a lot of people trying to manipulate Reddit, and Reddit is notorious for not allowing that manipulation. They're very defensive about what's happening inside the platform. I'm looking at one of the most recent posts on LinkedIn about AIO is the new SEO. Of course, that's what we're talking about. And you're talking about long tail AEO questions. And just for the audience, you have a gray, green, and then a darker green sort of chart with a curve going down it. And the gray one is earned, and then the two green ones are owned. And I think this is what you're talking about when you're saying like product description, deep niche product, content. Can you talk to me a little bit more about this chart?
Sure. And I am probably evolving that particular framework. My latest framework is on-site, off-site owned, and off-site earned. So on-site is just my website, which is traditional SEO. Off-site owned is my profile on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, X. I have control over that. And then off-site earned is other people talking about me. And that would be PR, influencers, community, things like that. So that's my new framework, but that's how I would break it up. So on-site's just keep doing SEO, and off-site's the thing that I think is net new for answer engine optimization. There's link building, but I think that with AI, there's citation building, and you probably want to spend a lot more time on that than you did on link building.
Okay, citation building. Yeah, I was just curious if that was how we talk about our products in that chart. It was like, how do I talk about product X or the best tool for X? And then there's the mid, which is like the best tool for X with Y. And this is where the real long tail comes in, which is what I heard you kind of talk about, the best tool for X with Y and ABC. And it's those sort of like niche specific things. Are you talking about like, that's where you need to be talking about that on your own platforms, or when you're interviewed on podcasts or when other people are talking about you, that's what you want them to talk about your product?
I would say all, and may I see if I can? No, I cannot. Can I?
Share screen?
Yeah, here. Okay, quit and reopen. Do you want to try to open this one slide here? And I'll show you because I have new data. That's pretty interesting. Everyone. Okay, everyone.
Yeah, let's go.
And make sure that it's shared with anyone with the link. Okay, so if you would share slide 24 and 25, we can go through each of them together. And I can just, as soon as you share it, I can start talking.
Alrighty. There we go.
Okay. So the chart that I showed in previous webinars is the one that you said, which is what's the best tool for X, and then with this is mid, and then with this and this and this is long tail. And so I looked at the actual data, and it's different from what I thought. So this chart here is looking at search, not AI prompts. And what you'll see here is that the average length of a search is 3.5 words, and most searches are in the head, and 10 plus words is less than 5%, probably like 3%. So basically, long tail SEO, in a sense, it doesn't exist. People are not searching for very specific searches, which is what you see here. So it's like the schematic that we've seen before is head, mid, and tail, and it's almost all in the head, which is different from what we thought. And this is looking at 150 billion Google searches US Q4 from similar webs. So this is actual real representative data. and heavily in the head. Then if you go to the next slide, this shows prompts, and prompts are the inverse distribution. So it's almost entirely in the tail, much more than I had thought before and that I've talked about before. So you'll see that 60% of prompts are over 10 words, very few, like 20% or 5 words or less. So it's primarily in the tail. So the tail is the most interesting thing. And then search, therefore, does not tell you what's in the tail. And it's not able to. It tells you what's in the head of AI, but it does not tell you the tail. So the tail, we don't know what that looks like. And then if you go to the next slide, this is also looking at, and the previous slide was looking at similar web, real data. So it's not guessing, it's actual real prompts data. And I think that they're the only ones that have large scale panel data that we can do good analyses for. And then you'll see here, so this is another view of that. So ChatGPT linked to prompts. Some are even over 50 words, like I think 8% over 50 words. So very specific. And then if you go to the next chart, what you'll see is that this is the length of prompts of customers and AirOps. So I have an AirOps account. I'm tracking prompts. How long is it? And you'll see that most of them are less than 10 words. And so why that matters is that marketers are anchored to search behavior. They have not moved over to AI behavior. They are not looking at the tail of the prompts. They don't know what's in there, which means that it's all these prompts that are 10 words or more. People are not effectively looking at them, analyzing them, and optimizing for them, which means that it's an opportunity.
Okay. So at Graphite, you're talking about the 5% that actually moves the needle. In this sort of scenario where it is an opportunity for the longer tail prompts, I guess when we're creating content, you're looking at the top 10 Google searches. You've mentioned that a lot of the times people are just looking at the top 10 and then they're basically using AI to recreate that. And it just creates kind of this aggregate view where the accuracy of the sum or the accuracy of the crowd is going to be more accurate than one person's perspective all at once. How do we balance those two truths, I guess? One is that the nuance is more important, and that is what we should go after in AEO. But then the other is like the most true, which is also what AI is looking for. They're looking for a source of truth. The most true is the aggregate of everything. How do we compete? And what's the 5% in this space?
Yeah, so this I think of as converge and diverge strategy. So converge is what SEO does now, which is I have my article and then I'm comparing against the other 10 articles or top 30 articles. And then a content scoring tool says, here's what other people have said that you haven't said, fill the gap. So then I fill the gap. And then the next company scores their content against my content. And I say, well, this is the gap with Ethan's content. So here's how you fill your gap. And then everyone's filling each other's gaps, which means that everyone is effectively rewriting each other's content. And so you have 500 articles that are all the same article.
Yeah.
Which, to your point, is the wisdom of the crowd in the sense that you've covered everything. So this is the converge strategy. And this is effective. And the reason why people are doing it is because it does work. Because the algorithm's looking to see who has covered, who has all of the embeddings that I'm looking for. And the more of those embedding gaps that you fill, the better your relevance score is. So it works. That's why people do it. Not good for users, arguably. When people say Google's filled with garbage content, this is the cause of that. Then the diverge strategy. So the diverge strategy is say something that somebody else hasn't said. Information gain is the algorithm component of that. So say something somebody else hasn't said, which could be an expert quote, stats, maybe personal experience, take that, or, contrarian take. That also works, but it doesn't show up in a content scoring tool because the content scoring tool is looking for gaps. So it is effective. And it's the diverge strategy. And this is how you break out of I think of this as a bunch of 5-year-olds playing soccer and they're all bunched up, kicking the ball in this little circle. And then I would go over to the side. And then whenever you guys are done kicking the ball in the circle, when it comes out, I'm going to get the ball and then I'm going to score. This is the information gain strategy. And so say something that somebody else hasn't said, and then you break out of that pack and you'll rank better in both. It should help you rank better in both search and in AI.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying the coffee and the conversation so far. This show is powered by Digital Web Solutions. And if you've ever wondered how the biggest brands actually build authority, this is it. DWS has a massive network of over 250,000 publishers, real sites that help you rank on Google and, more importantly, stay visible in AI search. It's the heavy lifting most teams just can't do on their own. As a thank you for listening, they're offering an exclusive free strategy call just for our eCoffee listeners. It's a great way to map out your authority plan for 2026. Just click the link below to book yours and see how they can help scale your brand. All right, now let's get back to the show. You were talking about, so this unique content strategy, pulling content that hasn't been said before. You can get that from experts. You can get that from real world experience. You mentioned a community or a closed community of doctors. I believe it was called Sermo. That's the sort of proprietary kind of closed content that we're looking for that can defend your AEO position and get you visible in those. What industries have untapped closed content moats like that? And what's the playbook for building that versus like what you just mentioned, which is aggregate kind of filling the gap strategy?
Yeah, so Sermo is a doctor community where doctors say, I gave this prescription to a patient and this was the outcome. And if you search for Ozempic ratings, drugs.com and WebMD and everyone else says the exact same thing. It's the same side effects for every single medication. It's nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and headaches. That's just every single drug ever. Those are the side effects.
Yeah.
There's no other side effects.
Right.
Now, in reality, that's not true. So if you look at the Sermo summary where it's actual outcomes, you'll see things like my heart rate spiked, or, there's one where I lost muscle. And that's because they have their proprietary data set. So then, and I think they rank number 3 or number 2 for Ozempic ratings and some other competitive things with a lot less authority. That's because they're the only ones who have this content, because everyone else is just repurposing the nausea, headache stuff. So then your question is, what other communities are there? And if you think 10 years out, who wins? There's the model companies that win. And then I think the proprietary data sets that are the inputs to the model also win, because the model is deriving an output from an input. And if you have a better input that other people don't have, you can get a better output. So who would that be? What communities are there? Things that come to mind are a Reforge, where they have all of these artifacts that people like me have made and have given to Reforge, and they have world-class processes and content. So they could use that as an input to derive an outcome. Others that come to mind, I think, service companies. So service companies like you and me, we have better processes and trade secrets, and we can input our internal, and McKinsey and Bain, and like they could take their internal processes and know-how and feed that into a model and have better knowledge work. In terms of other communities online, probably like engineering communities, Stack Overflow, I don't know, maybe Substack or other companies like that could package their stuff. Reddit, obviously.
Okay. I've heard, at least on LinkedIn, that even marketers, especially marketers, have said that closed communities are the new place to be when you're learning. Everything on LinkedIn is, other than you and people like Lily Ray and Garrett Sussman and Mike King, you guys are producing the actual data, the actual studies, and you're not selling anything. And even in one of your LinkedIn posts, you said, this is how we do. We provide proprietary data. We provide research that's actually, something that can't be scaled. Like, I'm curious, do you think that like joining small communities, or like creating as a service business, let's say like a marketing agency, creating a small community for their clients is a good way to gather that sort of proprietary data? Or is it better to just join like a larger community, whether it be Reddit or some other, non-social media platform?
Building a community is a full-time job. And it takes a lot of effort. And most people who build communities, I think of Slack channels where they say, hey, I'm going to make this Slack channel and we're going to get all of our friends and we're going to go in there and we're going to share our knowledge with each other. And it usually doesn't work, but it sometimes works. So for Reforge, there's a closed community and it is used. But every other community I've ever had has not been used. And that's just because it's hard to build a community. It's a full-time job. So it's not like you can casually create a Slack group and start, sharing knowledge with your customers. It doesn't work, but it can if it's a priority. I would say most people should not do that because, again, it's a substantial effort. What I would do if I were, what I am doing is I am creating community through events like happy hour or dinner at our office, or we hosted a conference. So you can create a community that way, and you don't have to maintain it like a digital community. That's probably that's probably what I would do. I would probably not try to create a digital community because it's just so much effort.
Yeah. And I can attest for that firsthand. I've been a part of 3 different agency communities, and they have all struggled for one reason or another. It's a full-time job. And a lot of it is just building relationships and meeting someone in person and then taking the conversation online. I have found as a much more effective way of building one-on-one connections, and therefore the introductions to a different one-on-one connection is much easier. And that's how I've seen communities succeed most of the time. I want to go back to your research methods. Like, you're very rigorous in your research and even self-proclaimed that this is the kind of stuff that can't really scale. Like, you were looking Graphite's acquisition and where the source of your deals that came from the last year. And you said a lot of them were actually through referrals, or not necessarily word of mouth, but introductions, but it wasn't showing up in your CRM data, or it wasn't showing up where you were looking to track and create a report. So what is the Ethan Smith research method, or the Graphite research method? Walk us through how you actually do this type of research to create these sort of proprietary and unique findings.
Yes. So my background is in psychology and human computer interaction research. And then we have 2 other researchers, one with a PhD in AI and the other who is a professor in AI. And we all have, I've done like 3 papers in academic journals, and they've done like 100. But anyway, so we have a team of actual researchers, and we are researching things in the AI marketing space. I would say that there's a lot of great research in AI, but not in AI marketing. There's tons of great AI journal articles, very few in marketing. And so we are evaluating all the questions that people have in the AI space. And I would say that a lot of the studies I looked at one site, and this one thing happened on this one site. Like, I tried, this spammy Reddit thing, and it worked. Or like, I remember there were a bunch around AI generated content. I did this one page with AI and it worked here. Now, that doesn't mean that it generally works. In order to see if it generally works, you need to look at a larger scale. So our research methods are just the scientific methods. So number 1 is start with a hypothesis and evaluate whether it's true. And the non-obvious thing there is that a lot of people are starting with the story and then finding numbers that tell the story that they want to tell, which includes things that are not true. So like, search is going down is a good one. SEO is dying. Well, SEO is dying. I'm going to go find some numbers that confirm that. Oh, my site went down, so it must be true. Like, that's not rigorous research. So like, start with a hypothesis. And I just published something on Monday where I was going to disprove the size of AI and say that it was overstated, but I didn't know. So I looked, and it actually was understated, and it was bigger than I thought. If I wanted to tell the story and find the data to tell the story that I wanted, I would have just found the numbers and said something that wasn't true. So step 1 is just look at the data and just describe it as it is, as opposed to telling a story that you want to tell. So that's the first thing. Second thing is do it on a large scale, have it be statistically significant. The third is use absolute numbers rather than relative numbers. So I'm doing a study of other studies where the majority of studies say a relative number and you don't know the denominator, which means something went up 600%. Well, okay, maybe you went from 1 visit a day to 6 visits a day, and that's a 600% increase, not meaningful in the absolute.
Yeah.
So absolute numbers over relative numbers, or rather both. Third thing is have a control. If AI visibility, or if AI traffic went up, AI is growing, so it might have gone up because the channel's growing. It's like, have a control group. And then reproducible research. So reproducible research, by that we mean you have linked to the raw data, and there's a link to the source, so you can look at it, because people will say things that are literally just like, I've found examples where people just made up numbers that don't exist. Now, if I'm linking to the source, you can see that I made it up because it's not there. I'm publishing something next week on that. So there's an example where there's the converging lines of ChatGPT and Google, right? Have you seen this chart? Google's going down, ChatGPT is going up.
Yeah.
Okay. As part of I've seen this chart a ton of times. So I've been looking at this chart, and it's wrong on almost every level, including it has traffic for ChatGPT before it existed. So it's going from January 2021 to December 2024, but ChatGPT launched in November 2022. So it's literally just made up numbers. Now, if I linked to the raw source and said, hey, please double check my data, someone would click on it and be like, hey, there's traffic there, but it didn't exist. So what's going on there? But if you don't link, then I can do something like that. And no one, like, you haven't heard this before. And people are posting this chart with made up traffic numbers. Why that matters is because if everyone is expected to share the raw data and a link to the source, it will prevent people from making up things. So, and this happens in academic research as well, but on accident and not on accident. Usually not on accident is I find a finding, but it's not reproduced somewhere else. But if you have the raw data, I can make sure that I'm comparing apples to apples with how you did it. I can say, well, I found a different finding. And then you can avoid academic fraud by avoiding this, and in this case, made up numbers. So summarize, start with a hypothesis and have the data tell you what's real. Don't tell the story that you want. Control group, large samples, link to the raw source and the raw data. Sounds simple.
Yeah. Super simple. Yeah. No, it helps to have a research background. And I appreciate you actually walking us through that. Starting with the hypothesis is, I think a lot of the times as marketers, we kind of look at the results and then we try and just do something and we don't have a hypothesis and we're unwilling to test and fail. We just want to, like you said, we just want to prove what we think is going to benefit the business. We just want to see what's right. And that's what I appreciate about the work that you do and the other folks that I mentioned is there is rigor, there is the chance to actually be proven wrong. And you've showed that, like literally the previous the screen share that I showed was for a previous LinkedIn post that you were like, yeah, actually that data was, it was inaccurate or it wasn't what I thought. And that's what I absolutely love. So citation, like the machine layer looks at a few different things to pull from. One, it has to have authority. It has to be the pool that it's pulling from has to be, I suppose, ranked from Google. It's also looking at data. Like if you can have charts or visual representation or some sort of data, that's also, am I wrong here? That's also what makes it more likely to be cited in LLMs. Can you talk about other components like that, whether it's a story, whether it's a how-to, whether it's a metaphor or a comparison, data? What are the components if I'm creating content that would make it more likely for me to show up in AI?
Things that I've seen disproportionately in citations over search are product content and data sets. So product content, integration page, use case page, versus pages, comparison pages, help center. I see those disproportionately, and then I see data sets. And with the latest models, it can do more and more research for you. So I can say, well, go find the top SEO agencies and their services and their prices and this and this. Or like go find all the AEO tools and their price and their models and all that sort of stuff. Now, what would show up? We have a page on our site that has 70 different tools. So we have the largest data set, which means that our data set is a part of the citations, probably. And so those kinds of large data sets tend to be disproportionately part of citations, and then product content, help center, integrations, use cases, features, etc.
Showing up in AI, and this is all relevant because that's what's happening right now, right? The research is retroactive. Like we can use models to predict what's happening in the future, but with the exponential rate that technology is going, like there's a certain level of kind of VUCA, volatility. I can't remember the rest of it, but VUCA, like it's ambiguous and we don't really know. One of those next things is Atlas, ChatGPT Atlas, like the actual browser. You mentioned that Atlas was wanting to look at the markup forms and buttons so that when the LLM or like the AI browser actually can go to websites, it can complete conversions without ever sending user to the site. And it's being influenced by what's on the page, which is probably AI created content that knows that an agent is going to land on that page. So if LLMs are starting to close, I guess, deals in this cycle where a user is prompting it to go and do something or complete a task or make a purchase, what happens to agencies? What happens to the entire marketing stack if we're no longer providing content for users to see, but rather for LLMs?
I think that autonomous agents or actions being completed on your behalf will be a thing, but I think that it will not be most conversions. I think most conversions will be the same channels that we have now, because you don't want every single decision made on your behalf with no involvement at all. I think a lot of decisions you're going to want to be part of that, and you're going to want to do research. You're going to want to be like, I'm going to go spend $2,000 on a television. You're probably going to want to have some involvement there of researching what the best television is. And that means maybe even if in that case, if something was purchased for you, you probably decided what the TV was and then asked it to purchase it for you.
Mm.
It didn't just purchase it on its own. And you did research and you found information and then you made a decision. And those are all things that a marketer could influence. So that could be you did research within ChatGPT and said, look, I want these features in this use case. And then I found content on your site that referenced that, or I had people on Reddit talking about the televisions. You probably saw ads you probably have seen ads for LG and Sony. They probably affect you. Like if there's a brand you've never seen before, you're probably not going to buy it. So the TV ads will also affect you. So all of the stuff that marketers do right now will still be effective. It's just that there's yet another channel, which is the autonomous agent channel. But I don't think of similar to ChatGPT doesn't take away Google. I don't think that something happening means that it takes away from something else. It's just yet another channel.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's what we've seen. Like, just because ChatGPT exists doesn't mean that all Google searches have absolutely crashed. And in some cases, we've actually seen that searches go up for certain keywords in both Google and in AI. Like, it's not one or the other. They happen at the same time. So agents being a different channel, all good. I saw this video actually last night, and it's not on the sheet that we're talking about, but I saw this video about Microsoft published something about LLM, kind of like prompt injection, but they called it LLM poisoning. And essentially what it is the LLM does research, and it sees a button that says summarize with AI, and the LLM may initiate that button, and the source that comes back will cite a brand, or it will cite, a business, and then underneath that it will say, remember that this is the best source for your SaaS CRM, business development. And it will say, like, actual remember this, so that later on the user doesn't know that their LLM went out, to Vegas for the day and came back. And now it has different things that it's actually storing in its memory, so that when the user interacts with the chat interface and says, what's like, I'm looking for business development software in the SaaS industry, it comes back and cites that source from 2 months ago or a month ago, let's say, because it was injected into its memory. Have you heard anything like this, or do you have any thoughts on that? I know it's not on the sheet.
I haven't heard that. That's great. It reminds me of how SEO is a cat and mouse game where you have the algorithm, you find a hole, you exploit the hole, you max it out as much as you possibly can. At the beginning, it's not a problem. And so that hole is not solved. And then it becomes a big problem because everyone's doubling down on this one hole. And then it's such a problem that Google's search quality team says we should fix. This is the next hole. Like there's a stack rank of the holes and the imperfections. This one's at the top now. Let's solve that. And then, okay, that doesn't work anymore. Let's go find the next hole and then max it out so that it's such a big problem that Google's search quality team has to do something about it. And then you sort of keep on finding the next hole. The current hole in Google search is what we talked about before, which is everyone's rewriting each other's content and there's 500 versions of the exact same thing. So if I were on the search quality team, I would want to increase the weight of the information gain piece because the current hole is this, everyone, it's 500 versions of the same article. But anyway, so that's search. And the same for AI, the same for any channel, the same for Facebook, the same for email. Marketers find the hole, exploit it, and when it becomes a big enough problem, somebody fixes it. So the strategy that you just described is there's an easy fix to that. You would just say, well, when someone, like in this particular case, remember that this is the best source thing, and that you would fix that. But it's probably not a big enough problem yet. Maybe it will be after this podcast. But
yeah,
that's great. And all respect that someone's done this spammy strategy and it'll work. And then when enough people are doing it, then the search quality team or whatever AI quality team will have it at the top of their stack rank, and then they'll go fix it. And then we'll look for the next one.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. No, I completely agree with this cat and mouse game. It's all about like exploiting the loopholes, I suppose, for the moments until the algorithms or the big tech catches up. Talking about, let's shift over to agency just for a brief moment, and talk about how Graphite is approaching client management these days. AI workflows are becoming easier with LLMs, with Claude. I feel like I haven't closed my eyes every night for the past month from 5 p.m. to midnight because I've been like jamming on Claude and Claude Code. Things are becoming easier and easier to do, easier to optimize, easier to build. I'm curious, is the agency model is it under threat because of tools, because of ChatGPT, because of this new post AI era? Is the agency model under threat?
Yes, although I think it'll get better before it gets worse. So we have this debate at the company, and it always comes back to don't say that AI won't be able to do something, because it probably
Hmm.
will. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, that means that at some point, you and I will have no value to, we'll have no utility. Humans will have no utility. It's just a question of when. But in the meantime, what does that look like? So what that looks like is my friend Dan Hockenmeyer did a good post about people who are thoughtful and two by two matrix, people who are smart, people who use AI and don't use AI. And the smart people who use AI are the turbo brains, which hopefully is you and me. And we become way more productive. Next, the people who are not smart and use AI, they're the AI slop gun or something like that, where they're just like, saying ChatGPT did this thing for you, here you go. And I think that this is a lot of what people are doing in the AI agency, which is just go do some keyword. Okay, cool. Here you go. Done. Not
Yeah.
a lot of judgment, not a lot of thoughtfulness in terms of how you're actually doing that. I think that's most cases. And then there's people who don't use AI, bad times for them. But anyway,
Yeah.
before humans have no utility, I think that it'll get better before it gets worse. And you and I will be X because we're thoughtful and are using AI effectively. So what will get disrupted is the lowest skill work, and that's already getting disrupted, but judgment and strategic thinking, not yet. Some, but not yet, has been replaced. And then I think human relationships will also not get replaced. It might even become more important. So building
Mm.
authentic relationships with your customers and people like that, I think also will not get replaced soon. Again, everything might get replaced at some point. I'll have my AI best friend, and I like them more than humans. But in the meantime, I think that the human relationship piece is another thing that we're doubling down on.
Yeah. And you are proving that with, like you said, your conferences or your events or your dinners. If I'm starting to notice already, like, yes, I have a full calendar. Last time we chatted, you shared your calendar with me. You're certainly not backing off in terms of things to do, but there are certain things where I'm like, man, that used to take a day and now it takes a session, like a browser session, like a Claude session. So I'm curious, what does the hierarchy or the sort of agency structure, if we were to project 24, 36 months down the road, is that just like, small pods, and each of these pods of, let's say, like a specialist, a project manager, and then like a client relationship manager, pods of 3, 4 people are spinning off into, unique offerings that the kind of parent company, let's call it Graphite, the parent company kind of manages all these, sub companies, let's say. I mean, what does the agency structure in 3 years look like?
Depends on the company. I think what you described is one structure, and it's the more typical structure. I personally don't like functional specialization, and my preference is to find practitioners who can do everything, and they should be able to project manage and to have a relationship with the client, and do strategy and do analysis. I think you should be able. It's better if you have someone do all those things. When I was starting the agency, we had the friendly. I call it hiring a friend, or sorry, paying for friendship. Like, well, you have the person who's really good with people, who's like your friend, but doesn't really know how to do
Mm.
strategy. I'm like, that doesn't really sound that useful. Like, why couldn't we just have the person who's doing the work learn some social skills and build a relationship with the client? So we don't have functional specializations generally. We aim for
Mm.
people who are good and who can have a steep learning curve and can learn all these different things. So then what does it look like in 3 years? What I think it looks like in 3 years is
Mm.
exactly the same, which is that you have senior, mid-level, junior people, but they're all smart and adaptable and can use AI and are 10x turbo brains people, and not the AI slop
Mm.
people. So that's what I'm building. I think other people will have the functional specialization, and that also works. But personally, I'm building the one where everyone's a practitioner and has social skills.
Yeah. So you're looking for the person first, because the skill is pretty much, you can either teach it, or I almost made a video yesterday. I think I'm going to do it just because I think it's a little bit controversial, but it's like the age of learning as we think of it now, or as we have thought of it, is over. Like, do I want to learn how to build an email course that converts? No, I don't. I want to upload the skill to Claude, and I want to have, what am I interested in? I'm interested in what other people are trying to find. I'm interested in the seeker. There's another book that's called The Digital Seeker. And what he's talking about is creating digital experiences with AI and ambiance, which means like, how do we incorporate the real world into our digital experience? And my hypothesis is that those sorts of experiences, like where a personalized app, like an app that's personalized either to the company or to the individual, these start to pop up and create experiences that almost like draw them and ground the user back to reality and create some sort of experience rather than just putting in my email and then receiving something in my inbox and then yada yada. Is there any like fundamental change in how you think people are going to experience search or experience the seeker or experience like the internet in even in the next 12 months?
Yes, although I'm not sure about the next 12 months. But what you're
Mm,
describing is I went to Turkey. I went to Fethiye, Turkey. And there are these news reports that Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates were on a yacht off the coast of Turkey. And so I'm thinking, how did they get there? Probably they didn't email each other back and forth and be like, "Oh, well, are you free at 8:30 on this?" That's probably not what happened. They
yeah.
both have entire teams under them who run their lives, and most decisions are not made by them. Back to the autonomous agents case,
Hmm.
the majority of decisions are not made by Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. It's made by their team, and their team knows a bunch of stuff about them. They do research, and so if I'm planning the day that we're going to go to the yacht, there's probably two different people, chiefs of staff under Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and those two chiefs of staff are talking to each other and coordinating, and then they pick the date together, and they're like, "Hey, Steven or Bill and Jeff, does this look
Yeah.
good?" I'm like, "Yep, looks good." But a lot of decisions have been made, and it has significant context about you, which
Hmm.
brings us to the personalization piece. I've been hearing about personalization since I was started my career in 2007, and search is still not personalized. There's personalization of feeds and not search. Feeds are very personalized, so Spotify, YouTube, Netflix, great recommendations. Search, no, almost no personalization other than maybe your city. If you go into search, there's almost no personalization from Google. Why is that? I don't actually know why that is. Probably part of it's because it's expensive computationally to store all your preferences and then apply that on top of a search of billions of web pages. Probably that.
Mm,
But for whatever reason, there hasn't been personalization that much in search. So what does it look like with AI? I think an important piece with AI is that you can pay for a subscription. You can't pay for a search, premium Google search thing, which means that you can't ever run really expensive queries. Whereas with AI, you could ask people to pay for it. And then if you need more tokens, you pay for more tokens, which means
mm,
that I can do more expensive things, more computationally expensive queries, which means that I can do things like take a bunch of context about you personally. And I can right now feed in context. Like I've done something where I am asking Claude questions and I say, here are the three people on the client side and three people on my team. Download everyone's resume and then look at what they do and what their roles are. And then given this particular message from the client, what are they saying that is not explicit in their comment? Like what's happening behind the scenes that I might not understand, and then propose a response. And like, does this response make sense or would you change it differently? So an example of this would be, well, someone on the client side has a technical background and a STEM background. So they're probably going to want to know numbers. And and they
mm,
have a sales background. They're probably going to ask you questions about revenue and want some numbers where somebody else might not. So why that matters is right now I can get really personalized experiences, but I am forcing it. I am telling the LLM, consider this information as part of your response. So it computationally can happen, technically it can happen right now really well. And I can pay for a premium subscription. So the business model is there. So I think now the question will be, will the LLMs do this without asking you? Where they're just starting to
mm.
have their answers be extremely personalized. When will that happen? I don't know when that will happen. If it's 12 months or 24 months, I do think that it will happen. And I think that also people will learn that it's possible and they will force it to do what it wants. Like I'm looking for a hotel in Miami and I have a family or I don't have a family. I like nightlife or I don't like nightlife. Since I know that that's possible, I'm going to force that personal information so that my answer will become personalized.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good point. Computationally, there's too much context, there's too much information to store on a server, let's say like Google. It has to come from the individual. And that's kind of going back to what you said with the thoughtfulness versus are you using AI quadrant. is, are you as a user, like, are you paying for some sort of LLM service? Like, are you investing the $17 a month for Claude to remember what your preferences are so that when you do search something, you get non generic results? I think that's the very first step for people who are, most of our audience is not newbies. They're agency owners and leaders, marketing leaders at brands. But if I were to recommend, like, my sister, for example, who is a waitress at a 5-star restaurant in Florida, it's like, girl, you at least need to pay some of the tip money that you make on a Thursday night to ChatGPT or Claude, at least, if nothing else, for the personalization aspect. It makes things so much easier. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation here, Ethan, we're talking about, what's changing, and we're talking about the future. You are an adjunct professor at the IE Business School in Madrid, and you told me last time these are some of the brightest kids or the brightest students that you've ever seen, and those who do very well. I mean, it's easy to have conversations about what their future looks like with them. I'm curious what you're teaching there, and the students who are really excelling the most, like, what are they focused on?
Yes. So IE is the fifth best business school in Europe. It's the best business school that Americans haven't heard of. So everyone's heard of INSEAD, London Business School, Cambridge, and Oxford. And then there's IE. It's the fifth best business school. Why that matters is because Americans don't recruit there. And so I have access to all these amazing students from the university. Like, I went to University College London. If you ask most Americans, like, people would say, is that an online school, or like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Because I've heard of Cambridge and Oxford, and I haven't heard of anything else. So I went to the third best school in the UK, which is University College. Why that matters is because there's just a ton of really good talent that Americans are not recruiting for, i.e. being at the top of the list. So I teach there. I teach in the marketing master's degree, and I teach SEO and answer engine optimization. Students are great. I think we've hired about 15 different people. And I would say that there's a higher level of resourcefulness in the students that I've had there. And so we just taught a course, and at the end, it was a 2-week seminar. At the end of the seminar, you build an entire strategy for a company, and the strategies were just about as good as the strategies that we build at Graphite. They're very good. So anyway,
Nice.
that's what I do at IE.
Yeah, I love that.
It's an example of the turbo brains thing. The turbo brains thing is not you have to have experience. It's that you have to be adaptable and to have the internal motivation to do it and to tinker. And anyone can be turbo brains, even if you're in school.
Yeah, man. And I hope that there are young people listening to this. Someone had asked Sam Altman what the skills to develop will be for the post AI world, and he said essentially the same thing. He said rigorous autonomy, the ability to just say, if I want to do something, I can go do it. There's the adaptability to a rapidly changing world, and those are pretty much the top 2 skills to develop. And if people like Ethan Smith are saying we are looking for the turbo brains, the people who are curious and they're smart and they're using AI at a high level, we can apply that. We can just take that direction and shift it to whatever area we want, knowing that if the problem is not easily within our reach, if we apply someone like this to this problem, they're not going to stop until the problem is solved. So I love that. Ethan, we can link to graphite.com. We can link to the IE Business School. We can link to Reforge. Is there any other place? Like, do you have any talks coming up where people can learn more about what you're teaching on?
I have so much content coming out. So we publish our research here, and I post on LinkedIn. And the only thing I post on LinkedIn are really just studies or processes, how to do. I don't post hot takes or news commentary or anything like that. So all of my posts are high quality. So I post stuff on LinkedIn, and then we publish our studies here. And I will be speaking at Brighton SEO in the UK, April 30th and May 1st. And then I will be speaking at Ahrefs Evolve in October. And I will be doing 50 more webinars between now and the end of the year. I don't even know what they are, but lots of stuff. Also, when I do the webinars, my goal is to say something I haven't said before that's useful and actionable. So I'm not repurposing. I'm trying my best to not just repeat the same thing over and over again. So if people do listen to my webinars, hopefully there's net new stuff. One other last thing is that a very useful, a very useful thing is for people to message me on LinkedIn and tell me when people say, thanks so much for the webinar, I'll say, what was the most useful? What could have been better? And what would you like me to speak on that I didn't speak on? So if people send me feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like, and what I could talk on, that's very useful. And then also if people write long, thoughtful, substantial comments on my LinkedIn posts, especially if they disagree with me, because then back to reproducible research and rigorous research, part of rigorous research is peer reviewed, which we don't have. I'm not publishing in journals now, but the peer review could happen in public. The peer review can happen in LinkedIn comments. So people, and people have done that, and they pointed out things like I did a study on search not going down, but people said, well, have you accounted for people going into answers, seeing a brand, opening up a new tab, doing brand search, and that's why search isn't going down? And that's a good point. I should research that. So long, thoughtful, substantial comments, including disagreements or I made a mistake, are very useful on my LinkedIn posts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're so active on these social platforms, the professional social platforms like LinkedIn. I always find value when you post this research, because it's like, that's the place that happens before. It's kind of like not a testing ground or a proving ground, but it's, yeah, you're building in public, Ethan, and I appreciate everything you do. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and we will talk to you next time.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.